In the world of professional wrestling, it is not uncommon to follow in your parents' footsteps, but not all second and third generation superstars are created equal. For every all-time great, there is a not so great, and that's why in today's video we are going to be watching WrestleMania's video talking about 10 wrestlers who failed to live up to their family's legacy. Before we get into that though, if you are new here, make sure to go down below, drop a like and subscribe. I'll post multiple wrestling videos every single week to keep you entertained. But with that being said, let's get straight into the video.
It'll be a cold day in hell before Bully Ray gets bullied by a measly Hogan.
Pro wrestling is an industry that's always been brimming with family dynasties that have carried on from generation to generation, many of which have been continuously successful. The likes of Randy Orton, Bret the Hitman Hart, and The Rock, for instance, all found immense popularity while walking the same path their fathers did. Even on a much smaller scale, former WWE stars like Curtis Axel and Bo Dallas achieved some level of success while carrying on respectfully the legacies of the Hennigs and Rotundas.
Just a quick note, I won't pause too much, but I absolutely loved Curtis Axel. Bring back the Axeman, he was great.
Others, however, well, not so much. Join us now as WrestleMania looks at 10 wrestlers who failed to carry their family legacy. Be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell for daily wrestling videos. Number 10, David Hart Smith. David Hart Smith may seem like an unjustified inclusion on a list such as this, considering he was one-time WWE Tag Champion and has since held a long list of notable championships for a long list of notable promotions. But compare his career to that of his late father and it's night and day. Now, Smith's main problem is that he was never allowed to be his own person in WWE. He used his father's running power slam finish and later the sharpshooter that had been popularized by his broader family, and he was also a consistently featured member of various Hart Foundation spin-offs, including the Stampede Bulldogs, the Hart Dynasty, and a developmental faction in FCW that was quite literally named the Next Generation Hart Foundation. Splitting from Tyson Kidd at the end of 2010 was ultimately career-killing for Smith, at least as far as his WWE career is concerned, and he was released from his contract the following August. He's found small modicums of fame along the way for groups like New Japan and the NWA. Plus, he had a brief, untelevised WWE comeback in 2021, but nothing has ever been enough for him to cement his legacy as equal to that of his father's. Number 9.
Honestly, I feel for David Hart Smith because, I mean, when you're talking about some of the all-time greats, British Bulldog, Davey Boy Smith, he's 100% up there. So I think anyone would have had a difficult time filling them boots. But I think for D.H. Smith, at the time his WWE cameo came, he just wasn't sure who he was. You know, he really hadn't stepped out of his family legacy. And how can the fans believe who you are and get behind you if you don't know who you are yourself? And there's nothing wrong with honouring family legacy, but would Randy Orton have been as successful if he was just constantly paying homage to Cowboy Bob Orton? Maybe not. All in all, I think David Hart Smith, Harry Smith, has had a great career, especially on the indies, New Japan. He's done really well for himself. But yeah, as far as a second generation WWE wrestler, you probably do have to quantify him as a bit of a failure.
Bruce Hart. The second generation British Bulldog isn't the only member of the Hart family to have struggled to uphold its illustrious legacy, as Bruce Hart is widely recognised as being the worst of the bunch. Not that he believes it though. The second of 12 children born to Stu and Helen Hart, Bruce Hart is perhaps best known for the exemplary matchmaking and talent development duties he undertook for his father's Stampede Wrestling business, during which time he helped produce many soon-to-be pillars of the industry such as Jake the Snake Roberts, the Honky Tonk Man, and indeed his own younger brother Bret. Unsurprisingly, Bruce appears to detest his own flesh and blood, as during an interview with the Fight Club Chicago, he called the Hitman a mark for himself. I have the utmost respect for Bret as a worker. I actually done a lot for Bret, and I'm not taking any bows for any of his credits for whatever he's achieved. I think truth be known, Bret's a bit of a mark for himself. It's something some people become. He was more for himself than anyone else, which is fine, I guess. In the wrestling business, in a way, it's a team thing. Everyone benefits from the guys that you're working with. You can't do it all by yourself. I think sometimes Bret lost sight of that. Even with Montreal, referencing the Montreal screwjob, I felt that both Bret and Vince, neither one of them did the wrestling business justice with the way they handled it. Bret was disenchanted with my take on that. I have a lot of respect for Bret, but he's sometimes more for himself than anyone else. That's probably his biggest fault. Now, while Bret Hart...
Is there anything wrong with saying that, though. I'm a huge Bret Hart fan. I actually think Bret Hart is one of the greatest wrestlers of all time, technically. He's phenomenal. But nothing that Bruce has said there is wrong. Bret does have an ego. Bret will tell you himself he has an ego, I'm sure. And you look at the Montreal Screwjob with Bret and Vince, that was a battle of egos. Bret refusing to drop the title in Canada was out of ego. Bret is arguably a selfish guy, and that's probably what's got him so far in the wrestling business. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but I don't think there's anything wrong with Bruce saying it either.
Went on to become one of the very best wrestlers of all time. Bruce Hart struggled to maintain an ounce of relevancy and never made it as a full-timer in WWE. His most prominent appearances are when he teamed with Bret, Owen and Keith Hart at the 1994 Survivor Series to face Shawn Michaels and his Knights. While at WrestleMania 26, he served as a guest referee for Bret's terrible match versus Vince McMahon.
It worked great.
He steal the spotlight within it. Number 8, Jesse. Two of the 4 members of the iconic Fabulous Freebird
I didn't know. I'm
deep
guessing
roots
he's
in the
Terry
wrestling
Gordy's
business,
son.
but neither comes
But
from
I
a
never knew
particularly
that.
renowned dynasty, despite their own never-ending fame. Jimmy Garvin is the stepson of Golden Era star Rugged Ronnie Garvin, while 2 of Terry Gordy's 3 children, Ray and Miranda, followed in their father's footsteps. Ray is the more famous of the 2 by technicality alone, as he spent 5 years competing in WWE.
I see the
under
resemblance
aliases
now, but
of
I never
Jesse
knew he was
and
Terry
Slam
Gordy's
Master
son.
Jay, though he failed to find the same success that had followed his father. Most notably, he partnered with Luke Gallows when he was known as Festus, acting as his handler for a lack of a better word. But gimmicks like this have only had a brief shelf life. There were only so many times the audience could watch Festus snap out of his trance. Really, he was doomed from the start, because as we're currently seeing with the Birthright stable in NXT, it's never a good sign when a 2nd or 3rd generation wrestler doesn't use their family name. As such, it was hardly a surprise when news broke of Jesse being handed his P45 shortly after WrestleMania 26. Number 7, Chris Von Erich.
Here's a tragic tale for you.
More distressing than that of the Von Erichs, but their legacy nonetheless remains one of the industry's richest. Not only did the family's war with the Fabulous Freebirds define the meaning of a blood feud, but the family's patriarch, Fritz Von Erich, was one of the all-time best wrestling promoters, while Kerry Von Erich, as the Texas Tornado, brought the WWF Intercontinental Championship to the family's dinner table in 1990. Dishearteningly, it was the same immense success of his father and siblings that drove Chris Von Erich to pursue a career in pro wrestling, but due to him suffering from asthma and having easily breakable bones, he failed to make anything of himself. He shared the ring with a who's who of genuine wrestling legends, including future Stone Cold Steve Austin, and was greatly supported by the loyal audience, but it wasn't enough. On September 12, 1991, Chris was found by his brother and mother, having taken his own life via a self-inflicted gunshot to the head. He was only just 21 years old. Number 6, David.
I think you can see on my face, even just hearing that, I'm getting a bit emotional. I mean, I'm older now than Chris Von Erich ever was. I'm 22. Yeah, the Von Erichs is a tragic tale in professional wrestling. And it's a shame. It's a great wrestling family, just plagued with tragedy over and over again. It's not often that I get emotional when it comes to wrestling. Well, that's not true. But I mean, this sort of emotional when it comes to wrestling. Real, genuine sorrow for people. I feel for the Von Erichs, man.
Sammartino. Although he didn't follow a long line of his ancestors like those in the Anawahi family do, David Sammartino faced what was an arguably greater hurdle than any of them did. He had to follow in the footsteps of his father Bruno Sammartino, legitimately one of the biggest draws that professional wrestling had ever seen. Debuting in 1980, David simply didn't have the necessary skills to cut it as a wrestler. He didn't possess the same magnetism that his father had, nor were his in-ring skills up to par, so it was hardly a shock when his arrival in the fledgling World Wrestling Federation lasted only just 1 year. He was best remembered for competing at the inaugural WrestleMania in 1985, where he went to a double countout with Brutus Beefcake, while his last match in the company saw him reportedly forfeit a match to enhancement talent Ron Shaw by submitting to a bear hug within seconds. Sammartino has wrestled on and off ever since, including a brief spell in 1996 under the banner of WCW, but following the legacy of Bruno is something that he never managed to do. Number 5, Garett Bischoff.
There we go.
One of the biggest cases of nepotism crept into its way in TNA in 2011, as Garett Bischoff, the son of Erich Bischoff, joined the locker room. Similar to how prominently Cowboy Bill Watts booked his son Erich in WCW despite a clear lack of skill, it was painfully obvious that Garett had only gotten the gig because of his family name.
This was when TNA really started going downhill, man.
Or on the microphone. Yet he was constantly sharing the ring with and often defeating Hall of Fame level talent like Kurt Angle.
He was always there.
Spot within
You
the
couldn't
ranks of
escape
Aces and
him.
Eights
This is
saw
why I
Garett
hated him
elevated
growing
further
up.
up the card as he became the go-to punching bag, which again had him wrestling opposite huge names like Jeff Hardy and Sting. Mercifully, Garett formally parted ways with TNA in 2015, after which he, his father, and Jason Harvey filed a lawsuit against the company for reportedly withholding their salaries. Speaking on an episode of his 83 Weeks podcast, Bischoff revealed exactly how much his son was allegedly owed. "They screwed my son out of 45 or 35 grand, and that really got me hot.
That's bad.
That got me hot to screw my kid out of money because you're pissed off at me or whatever. Bad, bad, bad." Number 4, Manu. A member of the esteemed Anuahi wrestling dynasty,
Original member of
is the
Legacy.
son of Alpha from the Wild Samoans. Manu was briefly part of WWE's main roster between late 2008 and early 2009 as a member of the Legacy stable alongside Randy Orton, Cody Rhodes, and Ted DiBiase. He joined at the 2008 Unforgiven pay-per-view, quickly becoming the enforcer of an alliance as he laid out Crime Time, but within months he was booted from the group and indeed booted from the company. A loss to Matt Hardy, which was an on-screen test orchestrated by Randy Orton, was a storyline reason for his exit, but Orton was also the legitimate reason behind his departure. The rumor is that the Viper wasn't keen on Manu's attitude towards the business, as he believed that he didn't need to prove himself given his family's history. Discussing his ex-stablemate during an interview for WWE magazine, Orton discussed Manu's exile from the Legacy, and though he was speaking in character, you can sense some real beef between the two. Respect, that's something that Manu, who had a chance to be a part of Legacy, didn't have. He grew up in the business, and you would have thought that he would have that ingrained in his mind. He had been wrestling since his early teens, and he thought that he was already a veteran in his early 20s. That's what got him fired from Legacy. But I think we're looking to include another part-time man in the stable to make it all the more powerful. I'll say no more. Number 3, Garett DiBiase.
It has to be said, I mean, when you look at second generation wrestlers in particular, or just wrestlers in general, when they get released from WWE, you really can almost weed out the good from the bad, because, you know, so many guys have left WWE and had great careers on the indies. Even in this video, we've talked about David Hart Smith. He left WWE, things didn't work out for him. He's gone on to do great things on the indies. Manu, maybe I'm ignorant to it, but I couldn't tell you what he's done since leaving WWE. So does that in itself speak of the ego or the lack of respect for the business? Maybe. It's an interesting thing to think about.
Number 3, Garett DiBiase. The DiBiase name may now be more closely associated with the embezzlement of several $1 million
The
from the
DiBiase
state of
crime
Mississippi.
family.
But to wrestling fans, it is a legacy that stretches back decades. Starting with Iron Mike DiBiase in the 50s, the family rose to prominence during the 80s with the emergence of his son Ted, who became the $1 Million Man in WWF. His son, also named Ted, later joined the clan and found a level of success that didn't quite match his father's legacy, but certainly left more of a mark than that of his younger brother. Indeed, Garett DiBiase failed to make any lasting impact during his short stint as a pro wrestler, spending more time in WWE's developmental system than he did on the main roster. In fact, he only appeared twice on mainstream programming.
It doesn't half look
He
like
played
Ted
a planted
Jr.
fan during Randy Orton and John Cena's clash at the 2009 SummerSlam, while on the following night's episode of Raw, he starred in a backstage segment with Legacy. Allegedly, a blown knee cost him his WWE career, as the plans had been made for him to be a continued member of Legacy, and eventually work with Triple H and Shawn Michaels ahead of the latter's retirement at WrestleMania 26. Alas, Garett remains as nothing more than a footnote on his family name. Number 2, Tamina. Considering the hazy legacy of her father, Superfly Jimmy Snuka, it is
That's
perhaps
putting it
no
lightly.
surprise that WWE didn't make much out of Tamina. However, the actions of her father cannot be solely blamed for Tamina failing to carry the Snuka legacy, as she had always been a terrible worker. Lying between the ropes and a charisma vacuum whenever she spoke, Tamina also failed to display any ounce of character development across her 13 years of activity on WWE's main roster. She was primarily the bodyguard or tag team partner of whoever needed an accomplice. 2021 saw Tamina seemingly get on track as a surprisingly and overwhelmingly positive crowd reaction at WrestleMania 37 saw her win the Women's Tag Team Championships with Natalya a few weeks later, marking her very first taste of gold. But even that wasn't anything really worth celebrating, however, as that year's Mania was the first time fans were permitted in the building in over a year. They probably would have gone wild for anybody, Tamina or otherwise. She hasn't wrestled since 2023.
I think, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, so don't take it with any more credibility than anything, I think Tamina is the #1 Nepo hire in WWE history. It's clear that Vince and Jimmy Superfly Snuka had a close relationship. I mean, if you want to believe the allegations that Vince McMahon helped cover up the unaliving of Nancy Argentino. Again, that is alleged, that is not proven, that is not fact, that is just theory. But when you already have that as like a basis of, okay, these guys maybe get along, you know, they've done each other some favours. To then have someone like Tamina, who was so incredibly untalented when it came to professional wrestling, and I mean, look, again, just my opinion, but in my opinion, she was terrible in the ring, terrible on the mic. I didn't see for years what she offered WWE at all, and yet she was with the company. Is she still with the company now? She might still be with the company now, which is mental. Okay, I did just go to WWE.com to check. Oh my god, I didn't even see her. She's on the active roster. How is she still employed? Oh, I can't believe this. Tamina's got to be the ultimate, like, WWE Nepo baby of all time. How is she employed by the company? I literally can't believe that. I've never seen what Tamina's offered WWE. And I can't believe she has had what is effectively a lifelong career in the WWE. It's astonishing to me, even wrestling as a whole. I've seen better professional wrestlers at shindies. I've seen better professional wrestlers performing in rings in the middle of, like, fairs.
Or otherwise. She hasn't wrestled since 2023. And number 1, David Flair. Given that Ric Flair was one of the greatest wrestlers to ever do the job, it was all but guaranteed that at least one of his children would carve an equally as successful legacy. That was proven by Charlotte Flair. Before the Queen tried her luck in the squared circle, however, it was the turn of David Flair to step out of the Nature Boy's shadow. Having appeared on a handful of occasions alongside his father in WCW, the second-gen Flair wrestled his first match in January of 1999 and managed to stick it out to win both the United States Heavyweight and World Tag Team Championships. The problem is that, like with Garett and Erich Bischoff in TNA, it was glaringly obvious that David had only gotten such a prominent spot because of his surname. Analyzing the quality of his output revealed how dreadful of a wrestler he actually was. Further nepotism was displayed upon him joining the WWE. Ahead of Rick facing The Undertaker at WrestleMania 18, the American Badass annihilated David on an episode of SmackDown in early 2002, but he had no right sharing the ring with Taker, even more so considering it was on the road to WrestleMania. That mercifully was his last attempt at relevancy. But there you have it, folks. 10 wrestlers who failed to carry.
And now him and his father don't get along, but let's wrap up the video. So, as we have seen in this video, family name doesn't always guarantee success. Hard work will always beat nepotism, unless you're Tamina Snuka. No, I might have been a bit hard on Tamina, but I can't believe she's still on the active roster. If you did enjoy today's video, make sure to go down below and let me know in the comments. Also, while you're down there, as I said earlier in the video, make sure to drop a like and subscribe. But with that being said, I will see you all next time.